Dimp Digital presents Idle Game Chat.
Hello, Apps here from Dimp Digital. Welcome to Idle Game Chat. This is the weekly video games podcast where we give our impressions of the video games that you can play today and react to the latest news from the wonderful world of video games. We are here every Monday on your favourite podcast app and YouTube, absolutely free. I'm joined by the former Dimp Digital Gaming Quiz champion. It's Pacman himself. It's Tom Adcock. How's it going?
It's going good, mate. How are you?
Yep, not too bad. You were late to this rendezvous by over an hour of an original time and then an extra sort of 15 minutes having to be given. But as people are in lockdown, there's all sorts of quizzes and stuff going on, so we're allowing people a little bit of extra time. But other than my time being wasted, I'm all right. We'll get through it, won't we?
Yeah, I'm getting fed up with these quiz. This is the only quiz now sort of in town for me now. It's like my nieces and nephews, all family, but like Australian family, UK. So it's kind of fun to see everyone. So this is the only one I kind of do. Yeah.
What about when Dimp Digital's gaming quiz comes at the end of the year?
Well, that's a mainstay, mate. That goes without question.
Good. That's exactly what I wanted to hear. We've got a big show ahead of us this week. We're going to talk about Resident Evil 3, which is the remake of Resident Evil 3 Nemesis. Don't know why I took that off the title. Seems a bit weird. But we're also going to talk about Resident Evil 7 and the DLC packs that accompany that game. And I'm sure we'll get into other bits of Resident Evil as well, because it's a long-running series now. There's all sorts of bits and bobs they've done, films and whatnot. So there's always plenty to talk about when it comes to Resident Evil. Before we get into the meat of the show, I just wanted to let everyone know that if you enjoy Idle Game Chat, first of all, make sure you tell all your mates, there's a video games podcast out there, and you can find us on the podcast apps. You can find us on YouTube. It's all free. That's all good. But if you do want to support the show, either just to give us a little tip or earn some cool perks or rewards, head over to patreon.com/Idle Game Chat, where you have the opportunity to become one of our very special patrons. If you don't want to, or you can't afford it, no bother. Well, thank you for giving up your time for listening to us today. Adcock, I feel like I've asked this question about a dozen times on various podcasts, but this is Idle Game Chat, the new feed, the one and only feed. Before we get into the specifics of Resi 3 and Resi 7, where does the franchise of Resident Evil sit in your favourite gaming franchises? Is it in like the upper echelon of like your most loved franchises?
Mate, when I first met you, queuing, midnight release, Resident Evil 6 didn't exist. Laughed out of the cold. Yeah, I love these games, man. They're some of my favourites. I do know why, but I don't know if they're up there on everyone's list. I guess I love survival horror.
Yes.
And yeah, the series has taken some brilliant turns and some not so brilliant turns over the years, but it's always been like fun to play. I like the games are always kind of in that perfect time zone for me, sort of 8 to 12 hours.
Yeah.
Good mix of like horror, puzzle solving, action. Yeah, I love them.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, it's a long running series, so it's picked up plenty of fans along the way. I've only clocked, so this is sort of like little cards on the table for me. I've only clocked Resident Evil 6, which was actually my first Resident Evil game. We played that co-op, didn't we, many years ago?
Yep.
So that was a really good introduction to the series, really, considering all the stuff that had come before. I've now done Resident Evil 7 and Resident Evil 2 Remake and the Resi 3 Remake. I've spent countless hours with Resi 1 Remake on PS4, and I think that's the original GameCube remake of that, so that's old tank controls and whatnot. And also tried to play through Resident Evil 4, but in all honesty, for both the games, I couldn't tolerate the fixed cameras in 1 and those tank controls. Even though you can turn them off, it's still a pain in the arse, like aiming and that. And Resi 4, a watershed game in many people's eyes, but just not being able to move and shoot annoyed me, and I think it just got the better of me in the end. And in many circles, what I've just said there is blasphemy, because those two in particular are seen as like all-time classics, and then I'm sitting here 20 odd years later on taking a big crap on them. you're the long-term, perhaps lifetime fan. Does my perspective on the older games frustrate you, or do you see where I'm coming from?
Yeah, no, I mean, you can't. It's your opinion. It's fine, but I mean, I think because if you've played, because I sometimes dabble back in old games. I think, I mean, to be honest, I haven't played either of those two in a long time, and I've only played through Resi 4 once.
Cool.
So, yeah, I mean, Resident Evil Remake many more times, and I feel like I haven't played it probably in 5 years now, but in my brain I feel like it would still be okay for me having played it so many times.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I do understand. I do like trying to play anything that if you haven't played it before is really difficult when there are such big like frustrations and bottleneck points, with the control system. Like I played through Shadow of the Colossus recently, and that's got a dog shit camera, and that's one of my favourite games that I've played a bunch, and that for the first time kind of really started frustrating me, like in the remake of that. So no, I get it. I think it's a shame, and also it's a great thing that a shame that they haven't remade those ones yet, and they've sort of started these remakes from 2, but whatever. But the fact that you've actually been able to play like these modern versions of 2 of the classic games, really, it's a good thing. Yeah,
the remakes are definitely more up my street. Resi 1's difficult to go back. I do want you to go back and just. I think Resi 4 is just more me. That's definitely playable in 2020. There's nothing really wrong with that. I'd argue Resi 1 and the remake, whatever they call it nowadays, HD fucking classic or whatever. I really want you to go back and try that. I just want that perspective to see whether you've still got it in the tank to deal with those tank controls and the other bits and pieces that go along with it. So that's going to be my aim for the year, to try and get you to go back into the world of Resident Evil 1 and see if your opinion changes. Resi 3 remake. The only reason I'm sitting here playing this is because on Steam you can assign 5 people access to your Steam library and download the games and play them. I have access to Hogsworth Dave Salmons, and he got Resident Evil 3 with a new graphics card. It appeared in his library. It gave me access, so I jumped on board and got it. And considering that both you and I loved Resident Evil 2 Remake last year, we did not take the bait on Resident Evil 3, did we? We did not want to delve back into the world of Raccoon City just that soon. Was it the reviews that come out that put you off? Was it just this is too soon, or what was it that made you think, I've loved Resi 2, game of the year for me last year, but not something I'm willing to go back to that soon potentially?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of all of those things. So it does feel really soon, like almost exactly a year. And I hadn't done the second campaign in 2, and then the lukewarm reviews didn't really help. Had that have been, on par with 2 or, surpassing it, I think then that would have kind of forced my hand a bit. But the fact that it was a little bit more, even though I looked at what people were saying were negative about the game. For me, I was like, well, that's fine for me. It's short. I've played it before. I know it's shorter. And to be honest, I know it's not quite as good a game as, 2, like par for par or whatever. But I always know I'll get around to it. I mean, probably when the price comes down, or if someone gets it for me for a gift, then that's when I'll jump on. But I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on this, and if they do align with what other critics have said.
Yeah, I mean, the critics' response, we use OpenCritic pretty much exclusively for our Fantasy Gaming League and the Grand Prix, all that good stuff. And it's got 79, and you contrast that to Resident Evil 2. That walked away with, I think, a 91 or a 92 when it was all said and done last year. So that's quite a big drop.
It's a gulf, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this year's remake, I said I played it and I finished it. I haven't bothered with the online mode, Resistance, because I just don't really care about that side of things.
Do you know how? I don't even know how it works.
So it's like a
horde or
kind of. When we played Dead by Daylight and it was like 4v1. It's like that. There's 4 survivors that need to try and get out of a facility, and there's one what they call a mastermind, and the mastermind can like set traps, spawn zombies, and take control of some of the higher power of enemies. So like I think you can spawn in the tyrant, for example, and then actually take control of him, and the aim is to stop people getting out. So it's like one of those asymmetric type things.
Got ya.
But to me, the mainline campaign's where it's at, and I've got it in the books. It took me about 7 to 7.5 hours. Now, I'm quite a slow player. Unless I was comfortable with an area in the game, I'd be walking, checking corners, checking my 6, and they'd still catch me out, like even when I was doing that. So they've still got those little bastard zombies that seem like they creep out from nowhere. But as I said, the biggest talking point I saw when the game released was that Resi 3 was criticised for its length. That's what she said. But the sort of easy that one, wasn't it? The you can certainly barrel through the game in probably less than half the time I've done it in. But that's for people I feel that are purposely kind of trying to breakneck the game. It was released, and the RRP, recommended retail price, over here in the UK was 50 UK pounds. So if you're looking at it as I don't care about the multiplayer, and this is going to be a one and done run through on the campaign, you could argue that 7 to 7.5 hours is a bit steep. What I will say, though, is much like Resident Evil 2 Remake, there are incentives to replay the game, put it on a harder difficulty, unlock new starting weapons and collectibles. Now, for me, I don't do things like that, but that's just my personal choice. If I'm one of those people that loves mastering games, speed running, unlocking cool things, then I would say the value's still there. Because it's only a couple of hours short of what really Resident Evil 2 was, and it still has all that cool stuff that you can do and steamroll through and master it. But having heard that little spiel, well, how's that sitting with you?
I mean, yeah, it's pretty much what I've heard and thought. What I don't understand is the fact that it is literally like 11, 12 months from when 2 came out. So you're well within the hype world still, and people are still talking about the old one, how good it was. It wasn't like it needed to be rushed out. And I heard that they've actually cut. I mean, my memory of this game's quite hazy. I think I've only played through it once. Yeah. Back in the PlayStation days. But I know there's like a clock tower, and I think in this one you have a fight outside it. But in the OG game, you had that was a whole section of the world inside that clock tower. Yeah. And I think there's a couple of other sections that have had a similar treatment. So I just kind of don't understand why they've actually, it was already a short game, why they've decided to cut more of the meat out. Yeah,
it does seem like a bit of an odd decision to cut specific moments out of it. They have, I'm not going to spoil the set, they have added stuff as well that isn't present in the original, from my understanding. So there's kind of I guess they've replaced certain areas with that. It does seem like an odd thing to do. I mean, the rumour going around on the world of the internet was that Resi 2 and Resi 3 was originally developed side by side, these remakes, and they're going to be a double pack. And you can 100% see that in Resident Evil 3, the remake, because it shares so much of the DNA that 2 had. The controls are almost identical. Some of the locations reappear from where you've been into. So I can absolutely see at some point where these games were kind of being built as one package, which would have been an amazing package. Can you imagine that?
But yeah.
Resi 2 and 3 sort of double whammy coming out. But for whatever reason, they at some point they obviously split off and decided that 3 was going to be a separate project. And it has cost them a little bit, because I think a lot of people like you and me were not fatigued, but just thought, A, it's too soon, and B, it's very similar, or it looks very similar to Resident Evil 2. There are some differences, though. Like, they've introduced a dodge mechanic that Jill, you play as Jill Valentine in this one, that you can use to dodge zombie attacks or dodge nemesis. So if you time your dodge right, so a zombie's coming to grab you, it will do like a little bullet time thing, so you can aim and let off a few sort of extra bullets straight to the head, which is quite cool. So that's kind of like a nice little action element added to it. And another thing that was present in the second remake, I should say, was that you had a knife, didn't you? But it used to have a certain like durability, and it would break eventually.
Yeah, that's it, yeah.
Not the case in this one. You get a knife and it's unlimited. So
Okay.
where that's the most useful is that when you come into a room, there's a zombie laying on the floor, and you're not sure if they're dead or alive. In 2, because I was either breaking the knives or I didn't want to use up the knife because I thought I might need it later on, I was having to make a choice each time. Do I waste a bullet checking if they're alive or not, or do I just ignore them and hope that they are dead and they don't catch me out? So they've definitely made some changes there as well on that. What did you think of Nemesis when you first got to go against him on the OG one? Because he's obviously the main event of this, and we've had Mr. X and the Tyrant and Resident Evil 2 make a real impact, but I'm just curious to hear your thoughts on what Nemesis was to you back in the day and whether you liked his inclusion in 3.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask you the same thing, because from my point of view, when I played these originally, I think Mr. X on 2 was only in like your second run through.
Sure.
So I never saw him. So Nemesis was the first kind of, like big baddie that I'd ever seen in a Resident Evil game, and I absolutely loved it. But also, I guess because of my like sort of brain back then, didn't understand it. It didn't feel like obviously it's quite scripted. Like having played 2 recently, and Mr. X kind of always be stomping around, and there is no like once he's introduced, he it feels like, I don't know how it is done. I know there are obviously scripted sections, but generally if he's in your area, he will then hunt you down, and he will not go away until you either lose him or wait in a safe room for so long. Whereas I understand Nemesis is a lot more just scripted, but I thought he was brilliant, to be honest. Like from my memory, he starts out looking a bit like Mr. X, but then by the end of it has mutated into like a ridiculous classic Resident Evil monster. And I also remember with the original game there'd be choices often, so you literally would have like a typed up choice on the screen, like either like stay and fight or run, and you could choose that, and that would then dictate, I guess, a couple of endings at the end of the game. So I don't know if it's the same this time round.
No, they stripped him out completely for that. So there's no choices to be made in the game. Like he is. So if you compare Mr. X to Nemesis surprisingly is not as menacing, I think, because I had the wrong idea about how Nemesis was going to work in Resident Evil 3. I thought he was going to be like Tyrant or like Mr. X, but a much more upgraded and powerful version that was just on your backside through the whole game. So I was expecting him to be there for large portions of the game, like Mr. X is. Like when you're in that police station, once he's there, and you've then got to deal with him until you've got out of that place. And there's other areas where he'll pop up as well. But he's a set piece. He's a set piece here. Usually when you need to get from A to Z, he will appear, and he just makes your travel to A to Z more stressful. And there's various kind of like boss battles that you'll take him on as well. There's like little arena battles for him as well. But you can stun him like when you're trying to get from A to Z, for example, and he'll drop items. I think that used to be in the original. He would like drop maybe a weapon upgrade or ammo or something like that. And the same here. Like I was lobbing a grenade at his feet when I had them. I'd knock him down to one knee, drop a little box, and I've had to pick some stuff up. But yeah, I was surprised at how he wasn't a lack of a threat, because when he was around he was a pain in the arse, but he just wasn't there as often as I was anticipating. And I think that ties into the fact that Resi 2, you spend a lot of time in that police station trying to get out. Like the first half of the game's almost in there, and you're going around in circles, slowly unlocking like bits of the police station. It's a bit like a Metroidvania with the keys and stuff. You kind of unlock new areas, you get new weapons, there's sometimes new enemies, all that good stuff. Resident Evil 3 is much more linear. Like you'll go through an area, you might go back through it once to get an item, and then if you go to the next part of the game, that area is off limits. So there's very little in the way of what you'd had in 2, where you spend a lot of time in one area mastering it. Like there was stuff that I missed because I just thought it was going to be like Resi 2. I'll eventually be able to come back here and sort of clear it down, but at the moment Nemesis is out there, so I'm just going to get away from him. But once I'd done that, that was it. You don't go back to that area. So definitely some changes in that. It pushes you through areas, and there are lots of points of no return. Whereas Resi 2, there was points of no return, or a point, but it signposted that quite clearly. So if you did want to go back and find stuff that you'd missed, it was there. But those are kind of the main changes, I guess, from 2 to 3. How does that sound to you? Are they positive changes, step backs, or just You know,
it sounds a little. I mean, it's not. It sounds like a little bit of a step back to me, but also, it's fine. It doesn't have to be like a retread of the game that came previously. It makes sense that it's a little bit different.
Yeah.
But as you say, you really get to that police station or the mansion in the first ones. They become that kind of extra character, really.
Yeah.
The
Baker Ranch.
Yeah, like as you clear them down and you sort of feel more safe, then they might release like a second wave of zombies or like dogs or something, or you unlock a new area. Yeah, exactly, or a new area opens up which isn't cleared down. So, or exactly, or like on my second playthrough, there'll be like a time where I had a certain run to make and I knew there was like one rogue licker there, and I was like, I've not got much energy, and I was kind of like, can I go up there and around the back and then down there and come back through that other way? Like you really get to know it.
Yeah.
So I guess you're missing out on that, but yeah. I mean, I do, to be honest, I've always preferred like the sort of more the classic Resident Evils, where it is like out and out survival horror. So, although as you said at the beginning, like how a Watershed or whatever Resident Evil 4 was, like a seminal game. And
it ruined the franchise for survival horror, people are saying.
Yeah, for me, it kind of did. Like I was never as keen on it as other people, and I guess even 3 was the first time it lent towards
action.
A bit.
Yeah.
I mean, is it? Because again, I've only played it that one time. Is it noticeably more action heavy than 2?
It feels like the set pieces are. Probably you get. It feels like you get more ammo, but again, this is kind of memory, not necessarily. Yeah, it's tough. I think it is. I think overall, it's definitely got a more action pace to it, and like I said, because it's moving you through areas quicker, you kind of get that feeling that the pace is just that tone's a little bit higher. But yeah, it's a good point of Resident Evil 4 because that was nothing like what come before it in terms of Resident Evil games. And I love the fact that they just start with 4 and the little blurb at the beginning's like, years ago, Umbrella did all this, and it's like, now they're gone. And you never got, in the mainline series, you never got to take them down, did you?
No.
Wasn't it like an Umbrella Chronicles or something, like a light gun game where you actually go to the base and...
Yeah.
Left people fuming. But there's rumours that Resident Evil 4 remake's in the works, and that there's apparently there could be potential links between 3 and 4 is what the rumour is. I don't know if that's true or not. But,
okay.
But yeah, so maybe they're trying to... Maybe this new remake timeline is going to be a bit more of a... Okay, we don't just eliminate Umbrella overnight off screen for people who haven't got a fucking light gun to go and finish off. But yeah, you got any other questions or queries about Resident Evil 3?
I don't know. I don't think... because I want to play this myself, so I kind of don't want to go into any sort of spoilery details.
I won't spoil nothing for this,
No. There's a second character, isn't there, from memory as well?
Carlos, Carlos.
Is he good?
Yeah. So one thing that's definitely carried over, and I'm not saying that Resident Evil 2 had the best characters in the world, far from it, but compared to what I'd seen previously, like I've watched lots of playthroughs of the old games, like these are much more developed or believable characters, and Carlos is good, and yeah, you get to control him for a segment or two of the game, and he's got different weapons. Rather than having a dodge, he can like barge enemies out the way to buy you some time. So there's differences in playing with him. He's a great character. Jill's a great character, and I think overall it's a small cast, as it mostly is with Resident Evil games, but they get enough screen time, each of them, to get over their little personalities, and no one feels terribly written or anything like that. So Carlos is cool. They've made him cool. I don't know how he come across in the third one, but he's a good bloke in my eyes. Bloody good bloke, that Carlos.
I think with the I guess by 3 it was intentionally bad, but the dialogue has always been fucking terrible on this, and no one was coming across cool.
No, he was. I think you can unlock and change his look back to the original. Like in this one, he's got like a mop, like quite long hair, like a little bit of curly, long, like longer hair. And the original's he's got quite short hair. There's a little option if you've got one of the DLCs, you can do that. And if you put that on, he looks about 30 years older if you take his hair away. So definitely made the right choice in keeping him the long hair for this one. He looks a little bit, like more at his peak, I should say. But yeah, he's cool. It's nice to play as him for a little piece of the game. And Jill's cool as well. She comes across really well. I like Jill as a character.
Well, go on. Let's do the review. Then I've just got a couple of follow-up questions once I know where this sits for you. And
yeah, so we're now doing like a recommendation system. So thumbs up or thumbs down. Game can get 2 thumbs up, which means that's a, not going to say it's game of the year, but I'd say if you're interested, go and get it. 1 thumb up, which is slightly below that, but still recommended. Thumbs in the middle, where it's a bit like, probably take it or leave it. Thumbs down, meaning not the best, and then 2 thumbs down, which is garbage, basically. I'm going to go with 1 thumb up. I was toying with 2 thumbs up, but I think that to ask the full price for the game was a little bit insulting, considering what's there. You only have 1 character run. At least with 2, it was slightly longer, and you had the Jill or the Leon second run to do, which in itself had its own problems. Like continuity-wise, it didn't add up, but it's a bit of a remix of the game. But yeah, I'd give it a 1 thumbs up though. Certainly, like if you loved 2, then no reason not to pick 3 up when it's at a price that you think, yes, that's acceptable to me. Like knowing that it took me 7 or 7.5 hours to get through, going, right, to me that's worth 30 quid, or to me that's worth 40 quid. Whatever that price is, don't miss it when you see it, because it's a continuation of 2. If you enjoyed that, you're gonna enjoy 3. There's nothing terrible really in this game.
Got ya. So then I'm guessing this one sits just slightly below 2 for you then.
Yeah, like 2 for me would have got 2 thumbs up. Like I think everyone should have played that game. It's great, unless you hate survival horror, and in which case don't. But absolutely.
So would there be an argument then if you were recommending to this somebody who's never played Resident Evil, doesn't really like survival horror games, but wants to dip their toe in, would there be an argument for giving them this, because it is a shorter campaign, a little bit more action based?
Yeah, absolutely. And there are some great callbacks to 2 as well. Like you see things that happened or were going to happen in 2 before they happen, and you see how certain areas look the way they do because of certain things that happen. So even if you just went with 3 first and then thought, actually, I can handle this, I want a bit more of a longer experience, maybe a bit more of a survival horror experience, then went back to 2, it still perfectly makes sense. And it actually it works either way, really. They've done a good job of making it work either way, which is great for people that want to play both of them.
Because stories never really be, even though there is a really well, I wouldn't say deep, but they've tried to make a huge continuing saga with these games.
The stories I think
they are. They're a mess, though, aren't they? Really, and already by this stage they were kind of getting a bit convoluted and ridiculous, and it just gets more and more mental the more characters keep coming back.
I feel like on this remake timeline they might do a better job of just condensing it slightly. I don't know if that's true or not, but I know it's ridiculous in the first instance, but I feel like they're a little bit more restrained, just a tad, that might keep it from being.
Yeah, well, the fact that if they avoid Resident Evil 0 and Code Veronica, because that spirals off into more of the origins and different strains of the virus, and you're like, fucking hell, I'm so lost with all of this now.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. And then even the GameCube remake added in other sections and other antagonists and things, and people had got tested on and all sorts. It does become a bit of a mess, but yeah, like you said, if they just kind of a bit more picky about what they do. Yeah. So I guess I think you asked me this last time when I replayed the remake second thing. Would you be interested in more of these remakes? Yes. And if so, which one would you like? I
kind of want them to do one, just because I think the Spencer Mansion in this setting with this perspective would be great. For some reason I don't think they will, because they're like, well, we've already remade it once, all this stuff, but whatever. 1 would be my sort of top one. And then I don't know much about Code Veronica or 0, whether they're worth a worthwhile effort at this, but certainly if it wants to go to 4 and then bridge the games perhaps better than they did last time, then I'm up for that. I'm up for a new version of 4 with Leon. I mean, has it got to be the president's daughter that he's trying to save? I mean, that, again, we talk about the silliness, it is the president's daughter, isn't it? If I'm ludicrous. That needs to be toned down a bit. Just like governor's daughter, anything, just not the president's daughter. How's that happening? So yeah,
one man team to say that. It's fine.
Absolutely. So yeah, absolutely want them to carry on doing these remakes where they think it will fit into this new universe. I'm kind of ignoring all the other games around it now and just saying like 2 and 3 are sort of their own new universal canon or timeline, and I'll be happy to follow that wherever it wants to go. Whether it needs to go back a little bit or forwards, then they're more than happy to. But I'd also be happy to see them have another timeline that Resident Evil 7 has created, because I mean that is a transition and a half.
Here we go, segue time. This is spectacular.
That's what the patrons get. I mean, everyone gets that because it's free, but that's what you're paying for, that level of quality there. Before we start with Resident Evil 7, so it is a bit clumsy still because I had an idea I wanted to do, I'm going to put the spoiler warning flag up just in case, because it's an old game. We've both played it, and I do think some of the interesting chat is actually about knowing what goes on in Resident Evil 7. So if you've not played it and you want to play it and you're going to be offended by spoilers, turn it off now, because I'm going to put the flag up. Once the flag's up, then everything's on the table for Resident Evil 7. So here we go. Here goes it's a bit stiff. Fucking thing. It's like a Resident Evil crank, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right, that's it. So Resident Evil 7 is now in the spoiler zone. The spoiler flag is up, and don't complain if you get this game ruined. You should have played it already if you're interested. Now, I've put off playing this game for years because, as with many people, I had a bad taste in my mouth on Resident Evil 6, if I'm honest. After you bigged up the series to me, you made me go back, and I went and watched all Resident Evil 1 through 5, like little gameplay movies and stuff, so I knew whatever story was at that time. It's impossible to follow. We put 6 on, and I think we got about a quarter of the way through and thought, what is this? And at that point, Resident Evil 6, the best-selling Resident Evil game of the franchise, and then when 7's announced, I've just got zero faith in Capcom in delivering anything good. Was you in the same boat, or was you like, no, they can still turn the ship around? Resi 6 was the sort of bottom of the slippery slope the series had gone on with, probably starting with 5. But 7, they can pull it out the bag, and we can get Resident Evil back to where it should be.
If I'm honest, I can't 100% remember if this is the game that sort of kicked off their renaissance or not. I think it was. Because this is one, is this what the RE engine was made for? I feel like since then. It's
the first one I think they did in the RE engine from the start, so it definitely had a bit of a leg up there.
Well, I'm more of a third-person man than first-person generally, so I wouldn't have had much confidence of this game being a game for me. I mean, I like PT, and it kind of the trait because this was brought out with that kitchen, I think, wasn't it? It was like the first.
That's it.
Like VR demo that.
Correct.
Was released at one of the game shows, and I mean that kind of went over my head. I sort of heard in retrospect, is this thing, and now it's going to be developed into the new Resident Evil game, and that had a good buzz, but I wasn't like keen for this game really.
No, had you played any of the Resident Evil Revelations game, which I think started life on the 3DS and then since then have been ported over, and we've had a Revelations 2. Rumour is they're doing Revelations 3, but now they're going to turn that project into Resident Evil 8, so that's going to be a mainline game, so I don't know what's happening with Revelations. But did you ever go down that path with Resident Evil? I did,
briefly. So I had a 3DS, and it was one of the first games I got, but I never really got on with the controls. It's actually probably the Resident Evil game that I've got that I've played the least of. It's not terrible, but I just wasn't on board for it as much as the other. So I've dabbled, but that's it. Just Resident Evil Revelations 1 on 3DS, and I know it's been ported to like PS4 and all sorts now, so probably much easier ways of playing it.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is Resident Evil 7 Biohazard, which is an interesting title because in Japan the series is called Biohazard. I think it's called Biohazard 7 Resident Evil over there.
Of course it is.
So
ridiculous.
It feels like they're almost like, right, let's start again almost. And what better way to do that than to jump on a first person perspective? Like, I don't know if there's been previous scenes of first person. I don't think there has been in the previous Resident Evil games, but they go down this new perspective. And I have long since said that for survival horror, if you want to just be scared, first person is the best way to do that, because I remember reviewing Outlast many years ago, And that was like the first proper survival horror game I'd played in first person, and it was just the tension was in a different league compared to third person. Just for simple things like you can't use the camera to look around a corner.
Yep.
Like you've got to walk around that corner, and if they're there and they see you, you've had it. But this is a first person game that also has VR capability. Now I know you played through the game first sort of vanilla, but then went back and dabbled with VR. Is VR just an absolute different level of, tension? And
it's, mate, being in that little house in VR, it was fine because we'd played through it, so we knew where the jumps were.
Sure.
But fuck that, mate. You wouldn't want to do it. It's just too stressful.
No.
It's not an enjoyable experience whatsoever.
No. Do you think any of the game was compromised by there being a VR version of this? Because you can play the whole game in VR. So do you think at any point the game was sort of... Did you notice anything, I guess, would be a better question, that actually I can see this is a VR game trying to pass itself off as a console game?
No, not at all. Because I played the whole game through, like as you say, like on the vanilla, like normal controls. No, I thought it was great. And to be honest, in VR, just kind of... the controls are a bit wonky and it does make you feel a bit sick, so that's your problem.
Yeah.
But I remember like looking around that house, like up, and you can like see like the damp coming through the floorboards above you, and you can almost smell it. It's disgusting, that place, and the kitchen with all the fucking insects in the pots and pans and that. Like it's so grimy, such a miserable setting. I would say it wasn't compromised, and the VR kind of enhances, at least visually.
Yeah,
it looks amazing. That like dinner table section as well, fantastic in VR. But controls are a bit poor, to be honest.
That's the one thing with VR, is that sometimes they can't get the controls spot on, because it's one of the few games where it's first person, but you can move the character independently without teleporting, and that is what can turn people's stomachs upside down. But back to the vanilla version of the game, I messaged you the other day and I was just randomly thinking, I thought this might be the best opening to a survival horror game that I've played, and I was racking my brain thinking, let's have a look, what are the recent ones? What's that bloody one with Sebastian in it? I forgot. The Evil Within, Resi 2 remake, and I thought, I can't think of anything in a survival horror setting, Outlast as well, Alien Isolation, that is as brutal, shocking, scary, and just sets the scene perfectly for like that portion of the game as Resident Evil 7. I really think the opening of this is just like, it's crazy from the get-go, and it doesn't just throw you into the craziness, it ratchets up the tension and then it all kicks off.
Thoughts? Yeah, I 100% agree. And I actually think that for me, the front half of these games are always, like in survival horror generally, are always my favourite sections. First sort of 4 hours, and I know you're talking about probably the first 1.5 hours, but it's super strong. Like the approach to the house, getting in the house, first interactions. Well, with is it Mia, your girlfriend?
That's it,
yeah. Something's not fucking right with her straight away, and then from that moment, all hell breaks loose, really, doesn't it?
Yeah, and this really is great. Like if you've not played that opening, like it's worth just going through that just once, because it's fantastic. And also, this is throughout the game. There's things that can happen in that opening stanchion that won't happen for everyone. Like if we go up to the stage where, maybe a little bit further on, like when Jack's you're fighting him in the garage and stuff like that.
The car.
Yeah, he can get in the car and start trying to run you over if you wait ages. I got in the car as well. Yeah, there's a bit where you can get your leg chainsawed off. I guess that's before sort of the dinner bit. Like if you do certain things, it's crazy.
I had no idea of that.
There's all these little like extra bits that are in there depending on sort of, guess not choices you've made, but how the game's perceiving that you're playing. So I think that's really clever, because when I was reading up on those, I was like, that's really good. That's really good for sure. But we take control of this fella called Ethan, and again, rookie at the game. I've told you what games I have and haven't played, but Ethan feels quite unique to the series in that he's not a cop, he's not a STARS agent, he's not a special. He's just this bloke whose fiance, girlfriend, wife, whatever Mia is, has gone missing. He's got a message to go and find her, and he just sort of sets off as a normal person. I don't know whether the normal protagonists are, if there's any like that in the series. There probably is, but my lack of experience is costing.
No, I don't. I think you're right. I mean, yeah, I think as you say, they're all either I mean, obviously there are a couple of like secondary characters. I think there's a convict in Resident Evil 0, but no, he's the most like bog standard civilian getting caught up in this absolutely ridiculous situation. Yeah, everyone else I think is sort of military or at least got some training. He's well out of his depth.
Yeah, and it shows during the game. Like he's a mess throughout it, and I think that's just an interesting take on it, considering how much of the game has been etched in the Redfields, the Valentines, the Leons of this world, and that you've got this random fella out there. And I also liked the overall kind of story of 7. Like, it's still a Resident Evil game, despite what that opening might present to you. Like, initially, it feels like you're led to believe that this family is basically like the Texas Chainsaw Mob. You know, that they're just this weird family who are just abducting people and doing God knows what to them. But as time goes on, slowly but surely it becomes more like a true Resident Evil game. Like, there's bioweapons that are still causing havoc. And I really enjoyed unraveling the mystery and getting to that point, because you kind of discover that the Bakers are victims in this, really, and they've been compromised by this bioweapon that's rocked up on their ranch.
Yeah, there's two of my favourite things about this game. One, as you say, like the start, it just feels, I can imagine a lot of people, I mean, it's a great game, but going, oh, it's not Resident Evil, getting annoyed.
Yeah.
But they do a great job of swirling this completely new idea in, as you say, it feels like a Resident Evil as you play it, even though it's in first person.
Yeah.
And the storyline for quite a big section is nothing like a normal Resident Evil. And two, I love the fact they just show you all the Baker family. Like, here you go.
Yeah.
And then after that, the level, you know, each section of the game will be kind of based around one of the Bakers, and, you know, be kind of quite unique in like location and, you know, sometimes puzzles and whatnot. I thought it was really, really clever game design, level design, character design. Yeah, because the fact that you just take it from third to first, but, you know, just picking up the healing items, picking up the weapons, upgrading the weapons, like weapon, like storage management, all of those things. You know, you got that safe section with it's like a trailer, isn't it now, rather than like typewriter rooms, and you can unlock some, you know, upgrades there as well.
Get the Magnum in there if you get those coins.
Yeah, that's it, the coins you collect. So, yeah, I thought this whole thing was brilliant. I don't know about your thoughts on this.
Yeah, like, definitely enjoyed the design of the game. It still had that, you know, that's what Resident Evil's built across, really, because we talked about how cheesy the storylines were. No one was tuning in for that. They were tuning in for the puzzle solving and the combat and the need to survive. And the Baker Ranch itself is, I kind of wondered the other day, I don't know if it's like a homage to the Spencer Mansion, like this big ground where there's lots of complicated bits and pieces on there. You can even find notes in the Baker Ranch that reference, you know, certain parts they've bought or built to
I
make
love
it more
that.
sturdy. Like
it's just like tongue in cheek, and knowing like how ridiculous what this like looks like, and trying to sort of retcon it in some sort of why some by like puzzles, because it's those like shadow puzzles a lot, isn't it? That kind of makes no sense.
No.
But yeah, they kind of try and make it make sense in the game world. They do quite a good job of it, I guess.
Yeah, and it becomes a character, doesn't it? The whole ranch, the whole the fields of it, and the premises, like much like the Spencer Mansion. Like, you get to know that house, that initial kind of mansion part of the house, quite well throughout the game, and as usual, all interconnected at some point. Other than
absolutely
your short sort of boat trip, but the Baker Ranch is a great setting. Like you said, it's a horrible shithole as well. And one of the DLCs, and I'll get to it later, but it's like a prequel almost to it. And I'll be honest, it's a bit of a shithole still. So even before they sort of get compromised, they're not looking after that place properly. They seem like nice enough people, but don't expect them to have been a clean family before that. They weren't. So
not getting a 4 or 5 on a hygiene level.
Oh no,
sure.
She's got some soup on the go, and I had a little look in the bowl, and I was like, it still doesn't look that appetizing. If I'm honest, Margaret, that's not doing it for me. What did you think of the boss fights? Because that's something that definitely Resident Evil always has these big moments and these big boss fights. I genuinely quite liked most of them. There's a couple, maybe the one with Jack, and you got to get the chainsaw, which felt.
Oh yeah, it was a bit. Yeah, that's right. You had to knock him into those like swinging bits of meat or something, and it wouldn't quite work for me. I think. Is that?
Well, basically, in the end, I was doing that for ages, and because when I died once, it said don't waste bullets on Jack, you can't kill him. So I weren't shooting him. I was trying to kick him with these things. It weren't working. And eventually I just shotgunned him in the head 4 times. And he went down, morphed, and then got that big fucking claw thing that he gets out with like blades and stuff. And then I could access the chainsaw to fight him with.
Oh, there's like a little one-on-one duel. That's it. I remember. I can't, if I'm honest, I can't 100% remember it. But I remember being frustrated on that exact bit, actually. It wasn't just, it wasn't quite working right. How, like you kind of know through like game knowledge what you're meant to be doing or whatever. And it just wasn't quite working in the way that I knew it was meant to be working. No,
agreed. I really like the when you take on Margaret when she's like a spider creature in that greenhouse and she's like roaring round, and if you let her spend too much time on her own, she'll lay like an insect egg that will then put those horrible flies in your face that you got to go and
yeah.
You're kind of chasing around this premises, just trying to wipe her out as quickly as possible, but she can get through little crevices and stuff. I really liked that as a boss fight, if I'm honest.
Yeah, I didn't, to be honest, going like later in the game, there's like I think it's maybe the 3rd time you fight Jack and he's just like
this blob of shit, yeah.
Yeah, absolute blob of
that's proper
custard.
Resident Evil there. That's when you're like, right, this is now
it's like they go, it's like a really nice escalation like Pokemon, and then they just go just fucking spew up all over the page and go, that's what you're dealing with. And you're like, well, that's gone a bit far. And then the last boss for me was a bit of a non-event, really.
It's not really a boss, is it?
No, you just did you see that coming? Like the fact that she was going to be involved with.
I kind of because it looks because when you get to the family, you just it's this woman in a wheelchair through the whole game. This is another great thing they did with the story, and she's just sitting there, and it's really weird. 'Cause if you move, she sort of turns her head and looks at you, but you can't interact with her, you can't shoot her. She's seemingly no threat, and you just assume she's like Nana Baker. But it turns out, actually, she's the bioweapon. She's kind of got she's infected the family, mind control, that good stuff. And, I think there's some notes that mention that she's started to age. Like, she starts off a little girl. And then when I saw that, I was like, oh, fucking hell, it's going to be Nana, who's not Nana. She's Evelyn. She's an evil bitch. But, I thought it was really clever to have her sort of just there a few times, and you're a bit like weirded out by her because she's creepy, because she's sitting in this wheelchair, but she's not interfering, so you just forget about her. And then later on, if you read the notes, you'll be like, hang on a minute, it's going to be her, isn't it? And I liked that. I thought that was really good.
And then the one other thing now, I sort of half remember this, and it's kind of, again, a good bit of marketing, sort of a bit PT-esque, but I can't remember exactly how the concept works. Tell me about those, so basically, I think there's videotapes. As you get into a new section, you get to play, but is it optional? I'll let you go through it, but
they are
there's
optional.
These okay, here we go.
So you can pick up these videotapes. I don't know why they're still using videotapes. This one's set in 2017. Like, I understand seeing all the lo-fi stuff in the remakes, because they're still set in 98, 99, whenever it was, but they are backwards bakers, I guess, so maybe. But you can pick up these tapes, and then it's optional, as far as I know, whether you actually do them or not, because what they tend to do is you'll put it in, then you'll play the character from the videos, whoever's filming, basically their perspective. So you play one as Mia, where you're trying to get away from Margaret and she's trying to like fucking bug you out, and you play a couple as that little film bloke called Clancy, who's a cameraman, and
he was the one in the like playable trailer they did, wasn't
correct,
he? Like,
that's it. Yeah. So that beginning hour or whatever it's called, is part of that. And you can play through those bits. And what they often do is they foreshadow what might happen to you as Ethan. And if you're paying attention, you can suss out some of the puzzles or where to go next, or even, figure out that actually there's no way of doing this a traditional way. I'm going to have to think outside the box. 'Cause I'm thinking of the one where you do the happy birthday tape. And it's basically a death room that Lucas sets up for you. And as you go through it on the tape, you can't do anything other than die at that situation. That's where Clancy ultimately dies, is that he gets set on fire in that happy birthday room. But when you do it through with Ethan, you notice that you can get all the passwords without having to trigger certain events. So the one thing that kills you as Clancy is that you take a little screw out of a container that's leaking then petrol. So when the room sets on fire, it kills him. Now, because you know that, because you've watched and played the video, when you come to do it as Ethan, you just don't take that tool. You can just go straight to what the passwords are. They've not changed. And then that's how you get round it. And I really like that. They're optional, but if you do them, you will find something clever out about them. But again, why they're using tapes, that's the only thing. I think the main criticism I had is just one whole section of the game, and that's like the ship section.
Yeah, 100%.
Like, it reveals a lot of the story, actually. Like, that's where you find out about what Mia's doing there, all this good stuff. But I just thought the whole section was a bit weak sauce, in all honesty.
Yep. I totally agree. I feel like with all Resident Evils, for me, the later sections, in terms of just, like, one settings, it feels like they've poured their heart and soul into the first, like, 2/3 of the game, and by the end of it, they're like, I'm getting fed up of this. Yeah, laboratory again. Yeah, I do. And I feel like not only... I feel like this one was a little bit poorer than usual. I really didn't enjoy it, that last setting.
No, I got turned around so often and trying to suss out where to go. I used one of those corrosive lock breakers on just like a random little like ammo crate, and for ages I couldn't find another corrosive thing, and now I needed one to get into like the captain's office, and I was getting really pissed off at myself. I was like, why did I waste it on that? But yeah, I didn't like that area at all, and I thought, like, how's a ship like that just sort of sitting there like in the bayou near the bakers, and no one's picked up on it. But yeah, that section was a bit poor. Narratively, it opens up and kind of tells you a lot of what's going on, but
I liked the bit before. I know we've spoke about this off air, but there's a nice little choice in this game as well, where there's like one of the bakers is actually helping you.
Zoe,
like she's like your guide. She'll call you somehow. Again, low tech, knows where you are in the house and will ring you and give you a little bit of a tip. But she's been like infected and needs some serum, but so does your Mrs. Mia.
Yep.
And you have to make a choice over who to help. Have you read like what happens either way here?
I haven't. No, I chose Mia.
Right.
I think you did as well, because like, as if you're going to choose anyone other than your wife. That is the canonical choice as well. I know that much.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that's the canon way. I think I was watching a playthrough of that section, funny enough, and they chose Mia as well. And then they were talking about, it was on Easy Allies. They were talking about what happens if you choose Zoe. And apparently she just dies. Like,
that's it. Yeah.
When you get to the boat or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which seems like weak sauce.
By the same thing that whatever knocks you off kills her, basically.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, that's just, what's the point in doing that?
And then actually the other thing I wanted to ask you about, because I remember not enjoying this, is like the enemies in this, like sort of the most of the enemies, they're not your traditional zombies. So each section you've got one of the bakers to deal with in like various, and isn't zombies now, they're called molded. Is that right?
Yeah, they're called molded.
Yeah.
I kind of initially didn't like them. I was like, they're just like bog standard stuff. And then, like, as the game went on, I was like, it's quite cool, kind of like shooting off their legs or one of their arms, or blowing their head up or stuff. Like, they were the kind of most Resident Evil thing, like in the early game, that kind of just gives you that attachment that it's still a Resident Evil game. So I came to sort of accept them for what they were, but they weren't overly. They didn't feel like there's a lot of thought put into them. Like, there's these clear like Licker rip-offs that aren't anywhere near as good as Lickers, like the little four-legged ones. So yeah, they're not great. They're like the fodder enemy of the game, so you do fight them a lot, and that's pretty much all you fight on that ship, which is probably why perhaps we didn't like that as much. Yeah. But yeah, they're not.
And you've said it
great.
before. You've said it before about the sort of Resi 2 remake and 3. Like, those zombies are the best zombies you get in video games, like, bottom line. So anything that's going to have a hard time against them, and these are pretty poor enemy design, even in, not against that. They're not the most imaginative things in the world, are they?
Yeah, it's hard work, I guess. Like, if you don't do zombies, what do you do that's, a shape that's easy, like for fodder enemy? It can't be easy. But there's a couple...
Exactly.
Because I've played this a bit backwards. I played Resi 2 Remake before playing 7. There's a couple of things like item management and the map that weren't in 7 that were in 2. So the main thing I noticed was that it doesn't tell you, or at least I didn't notice, it doesn't tell you in 7 when you can discard an item. So I was fucking carrying around that scorpion key for like 80% of the game, and you don't need it after like the first 3 hours, because in 2 it'll put a little cross or a bin sign next to it saying, right, you can get rid of this now, you don't need it. Just a little touch like that, because an inventory space is always a pain in the arse. So little things like that. And I think the map as well in 2 and 3 is great, because it kind of tells you if you've cleared an area or a room. You don't really get that here. It'll show you where there's a locked door and whatnot, but it won't necessarily say if you've got all the items in that room. So if you want to try and get what you can, you can't. But overall, good to great game. Like, really puts the series back on track. I feel sorry for those people that have skipped it because they hated 6 so much. I don't blame them, but you're genuinely missing out on like a good game here. Like, rating wise or like recommendation wise, I'll probably give it 2 thumbs up, because I love the fact that it's a different Resident Evil game. Like, I can now, in theory, have this remake series going on, third person, and then now, like, from 7 onwards, perhaps a first person set of these games, and I'm open to seeing that. So I would give it 2 thumbs up.
Lovely. And I'm guessing I think they're probably going to do a trilogy of these first person ones and finish, because that's the other thing, I guess, another ultimate segue. Right at the end, you get the kind of most Resident Evil thing ever. Like, one of the old characters comes in as part of the extraction team, and then sort of feeds into the DLC as well, as far as I know, right?
Yep, correct. So the DLC, there's kind of like 6 bits of DLC. Well, 7 or 8 bits of DLC. 2 of them are mini games. So one's where you've got to run around the house and get Jack some food, like stupid, like mini games, not mechanical or anything like that. So you've got to run around and do that. Another one's called Ethan Must Die, and that's like another sort of level almost, where you've got to get through the Baker house doing various things, but the difficulty is ultra hard, like 2 hits and you're dead. And it has, and all the item drops are randomized. There's those bomb boxes still that Lucas sets off for you, so they're annoying. I've seen them kill people. It's got a little bit of Dark Souls in it, like you can go to where you last died and pick up your stuff if you get there without dying, so that's kind of cool. But super hard Ethan Must Die, like ridiculously hard. And then the DLC after that's split into like 2 sections. You've got banned footage, which is more of these videotapes that they've seemingly been released, and then you've got 2 what I'd say are more traditional DLC packs in Not a Hero and End of Zoe. So banned footage, 3 of those are Clancy again. So you find out what happened to him before he gets burnt to death by Lucas. One's called Nightmare. That's a horde mode. So you get Jack throws you in the basement, and you've got to survive until dawn, which essentially equates to 5 waves. You start off with nothing, but you pick up scrap, which you can use to craft weapons, ammo upgrades, set traps, activate turrets. And to get more scrap, you have to start these compactors that are located around the basement. There's like 3 of them or 4 of them. And over time, they will produce scrap. So you've got to run, grab the scrap, go back to your workbench, create stuff, and survive, basically. And at the end of each wave, there'll be like either a load of enemies thrown at you, or sometimes Jack will turn up and you've got to put him down. So that's like a nice action bit of DLC there. You've got Bedroom, which is essentially an escape room puzzle. You know those things they advertise in real life where they're like, a group of 10 of you in a room, how'd you get out? Yeah. It's that, but in a game. The twist here is that Margaret's running it, that bloody insect slapper, and she will come into the room if you make too much noise, and she will hurt you. Like, she'll blow all that insect crap in your face, and it'll take away a bit of health if she notices anything's out of place from like when you originally left it. So as you get up and explore and like move things around in order to do the puzzles, if she suddenly gives you like a minute warning, it's like, right now I've got to try and put everything back as best I remember it before she comes in, and then if you don't, she'll hurt you, and eventually if you do it too many times, she'll kill you. So that's quite a little interesting tip about it. Got to get your wits up. Again, like 0 action in this one. It's purely puzzle based. And whatnot. Then you've got 21, which is Lucas's little game where he sets up blackjack, and you're playing against another sort of AI player, random bloke who you don't know, and it's a death trap game. Like, win the hands and he'll die, lose the hands, you'll die. So they're the sort of 3 Clancy based ones. And then Daughters is the prequel DLC I mentioned earlier, which I thought had real great potential, because I was thinking, I'm going to get a really good look at the Baker family, like the dynamic before all the shit went down, so you can see them as normal people. And you get like you're playing as Zoe, sorry.
Okay, yeah.
So and you get that for a flash, like Jack comes in with Evelyn and is like, I just found this girl washed up again. I'll put her in the guest room. And then they mention that there's another sort of guest that's staying in that trailer that you save.
Yeah.
But after about 5 minutes, like when you're tasked to go and put some new clothes on Evelyn 'cause she's wet, like that's when she gets up and causes havoc. So you only really get like a couple of minutes of like normality, which I thought was a bit of a missed boat. I'd love to would have seen how they all, were interacting just for like maybe 20 minutes, and then all the shit goes down. And then as though you've just got to get out or try and escape. And there's two endings to that. Like there's two paths you can take. One is like the true path, as they call it, and then the other one's like what if scenario, like what if you chose this. So there's a couple of different playthroughs you can do for that, but that's all the banned footage stuff. So they're sort of like a collection of like little segments. Probably take about 45 minutes to an hour on each of them. 21 can be frustrating because you are a bit of like luck of the draw. Like sometimes it'll just fuck you over and you'll get 21. You're like, right, how's that working? But definitely the meat of the DLC is Not a Hero and End of Zoe. Not a Hero is the one with Chris Redfield that you mentioned. So you are part of Umbrella, like it's their biohazard like clean-up team, I guess. So it sounds like Umbrella have kind of resurrected under like a good banner, but who knows? I guess we'll find out in later entries. You get an automatic rifle, you get a shotgun, you can stun enemies with bullets, then punch them and kill them, and you're essentially chasing Lucas around in that one. So lot more action heavy. Has like, you're in the mines mainly, so I didn't like the mines either too much.
No, that's when it started getting weak, and then
so that's not great. The mines are okay. They introduced a couple of new enemy types, but it's mainly just an excuse for you to get some action in, I guess, and play as Chris Redfield. And then you've got End of Zoe, which is set 2 weeks after the events of 7, and you take control of Joe Baker, who's Jack's brother, so like Zoe's uncle. And all you're essentially trying to do here is save Zoe, who at the end of the game, kind of we don't know what's happened with her. You sort of leave her on that little platform, and she's like, "There's no escape," and you're like, "Well, I had to save my wife," or whatever it is. But Joe finds her, and she's like slowly dying from the infection. And the aim of the game is to try and save her. Get a vaccine, all this stuff. But there's like a big, horrible monster in the swamps that's lurking around that you've got to try and take care of as well. Standard sort of enemies as well. The real twist here is that there's no guns. This is a melee-focused DLC pack, so you punch the moulded in the head and crush the head when you knock them over with your feet. So it's a good twist on the formula. Like it ties up kind of like any loose ends, like major loose ends from Resi 7, like what happened to people, and then does what DLC I think should do is try and do something a bit different with the core gameplay, and definitely, just smashing and beating up moulded is quite a good way of doing that.
Nice. And remind me, so is one of these DLCs free and one's paid for?
Yeah, so Not a Hero's paid for. The banned footage are paid for, and they're in 2 volumes. And End of Zoe is paid for. So it's only Not a Hero that's free.
Okay.
That's the free one they announced. But I borrowed this game off Biff, and he had the gold edition, which comes with all of it. And nowadays, I've seen the gold edition go on sale for like 10 UK pounds. So
that's good, isn't it?
Yeah,
Jesus, right?
It's not even close, is it? If you haven't got the game, get the gold edition. You'll find it for a tenner, and you get all this and the base game, which is took me about 9.5 hours, which I think is a good spot for a survival horror game.
Yeah, sounds about right. Yeah, because there's only so much you can play before wanting a break with this, innit? You can clear a section down and then say, right, yeah.
Well,
nice one.
Any questions on the DLC or any other Resident Evil 7 thoughts?
No, mate. It all just sounds good. To be honest, it kind of makes me want to go back, really. But I think I'll crack on with 3 at some point, and then maybe revisit and have a look at this DLC when I do.
Yeah, sweet. Right, we'll close this particular episode down then. Thanks everyone for joining us. Remember, we'll be back here next Monday with more Idle Game Chat. So thanks for your time, and ta-da.
This was a Dimp Digital production.